Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. Go to audibletrial.com/Rushmore. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Okay, so where were we?
Fuck, I derailed the train. I'm sorry, you guys.
That's okay.
That's okay. No.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mount Rushmore Podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm always joined, connected at the hip, me and Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
And Richard and Michael like to talk. They talk. Pickle, tickle, chip, talk, like a little more.
Talk, happy talk.
What happens here?
And they
It's the computer break.
when they talk.
Reset the computer.
That's all I need to reset this computer. When they talk, they always disagree on things, and sometimes those things we discuss here on the Mount Rushmore podcast. And sometimes they agree too. But this time thing they're going to talk about and debate about is the Mount Rushmore of Tim Burton. Things Tim Burton. I'm maybe thinking films. I'm just going to leave it open. Timothy Bertoni.
And not just specifically, and this is your topic, Michael.
Yeah.
With
Tim Burton movies.
With a little bit of leeway.
With a little bit of leeway.
Okay.
Tim Burton is...
Because there's a plumber named Tim Burton in Glendale.
His movies are great. I chose this topic. I must have been watching like a Tim Burton movie. I probably was watching one of the movies that I was want to talk about.
Okay.
And I thought, he has such an interesting design aesthetic as a director, and it kind of doesn't just affect the movies that he's personally directed, but some of the other films that he's been involved with. And he's just like such this unique person and a unique collaborator, and kind of relies a lot on the collaboration of some very specific people that kind of, you can see it kind of pushes him forward. Mm-hmm. And, on top of him making some really kind of all-time great movies, he makes some amazingly strange bad movies.
Yeah.
True.
And like, I was shocked to see how many movies are adaptions. Like way more than half of his movies are adapted works from other sources. And I thought, this is a guy that now Disney and sometimes other kind of house, movie studios bring in to adapt a product or adapt something into one of his movies. And I think the idea that they're like, let's get Tim Burton to do, let's say, Batman is fascinating. Or let's get Tim Burton to, next year, do Dumbo is crazy to me. And but they keep coming back to him, and I think that's ultimately really fascinating.
Yeah, if you need to remystify a franchise, give it to Tim Burton. Yeah.
Remystify.
What a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael chose it. Richard starts it.
All right, I got categories. Wow.
Categories. Michael, you abandoned categories a long time ago.
No, I have categories this week.
Okay.
Of sorts.
Okay, so I've got the Blueprint. Got Goofy Tim Burton, Dark Tim Burton / Animated Tim Burton.
Oh.
And Never Got Made.
Oh, that's very interesting.
So the first one made sense, the Blueprint, and it's Beetlejuice.
Yeah, on my list too.
I figured it would be.
But it's on my list under, I have 4 different collaborators.
Oh, okay.
So it's under
Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp, and Helena Carter.
Under Winona Ryder.
Come on, Danny Elfman's in there. Okay.
That's true. So I put this on here, even though it wasn't his first live-action movie that he directed. That was Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Also an adaptation.
In a way it was, yeah.
What do you say, adaptation?
Like, I mean...
adapted from a different medium.
It's not adaptation? Am I being an asshole here?
Yeah, you
kind of mean...
bit.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, guys.
I mean, it is adaptation, but we kind of let Michael...
Okay, I'll cut this shit out. Sorry. I'm being a dickhead. I apologize.
I want to adapt myself onto a different podcast. Will somebody else adapt me?
You
Dap your fist in our faces in a second.
I'm going to dab because it's the thing all the kids are doing.
Oh, that's the worst thing I've ever
Note
seen.
to self, cut all this.
Yeah.
So it is something that's adapted, I guess, because it's what came, and that's partially why I didn't choose it as the Blueprint, because I don't think of that as, yes, it's a Tim Burton movie, and yes, it's got a lot of his elements to it, but to me, it's owes so much to Pee Wee Herman and having that Pee Wee Herman kind of world that was already developed.
Yeah.
I think Beetlejuice is the first movie where you really get the full
barfed out of Tim Burton's brain is whatever Michael Keaton's character is.
Right, where you get that, all the aesthetics of like dark and then these crazy bright things and loud and
checkerboard patterns and stripes and gothicness. And
It's the movie that kind of sets what his aesthetic is going to be for the next 25 years.
Yeah. Like the Lydia Dietz character, like Winona Ryder as Lydia Dietz, who's this gothic loner outsider. She's separate from her family, who are like these rich yuppies.
Right.
Like this archetype that kind of follows him through every single movie. Like you talk about Blueprint, and that's like one of those. This is the character within the movie that's like a weirdo, a loner, and it's like, let's flash forward. I can't wait till Dumbo's this weirdo. I mean, Dumbo is a weirdo loner.
Yeah,
character.
It's kind of a perfect fit.
Yeah.
You know, and it establishes, like you said, kind of these very normal, straight characters, and what happens if you bring something supernatural into this world. It establishes how many of his movies either are musicals or have these kind of musical numbers that kind of pop up in the middle of it somewhere. And it kind of establishes, let's drop a manic character into this world, or somebody who is not oddball for sure, but a lot of his characters have this like kind of manic energy.
What you need is a ghost that has the most.
And he was.
And you're just in there.
So why did you pick it, Michael?
Well, I looked at all of these through like who he kind of would glom onto a certain actor or a collaborator and would kind of roll with that person for a little bit. You know, with Winona Ryder, she carried over into like Edward Scissorhands as well, and didn't really work with him much past that because he kind of at that point had picked up
he's got muses.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah, they become his muse.
Yeah. And I think that she kind of in this movie was kind of like this iconic thing for him that he could attach himself to. And it, like you said, it's just like it's just a fun movie and a weird movie, and it's like the Tim Burtoniest of his movies.
Yeah.
That seems like maybe the Winona Ryder character represents Tim Burton in these movies. The person who in Beetlejuice, she's very visibly kind of an outsider. And then in Edward Scissorhands, she's kind of an insider, but she's seeking to find this other world that she knows exists, that the Beetlejuice or the Edward Scissorhands kind of escorts her into. Yeah,
she went from the outsider to being the popular girl that's with the jock.
Yeah.
But finds beauty in the weirdo outsider that's up the mountain.
It is interesting, too, because I would almost say they both wear suits. One's striped, one's kind of checkered, but Beetlejuice and Pee-wee aren't too dissimilar from each other either. It's kind of this...
that manic energy.
Manic energy, like you said, exists as kind of this cyclone. Is he really in this world, and do people recognize him as thus, or is he not?
Yeah, it's sort of establishing this reality that's, beyond the supernatural. And you can see this back with Pee-wee. That's sort of this heightened reality, or this hyper reality, or there's stuff about it that's just kind of off.
Yeah. So, hey, that's cool. Like minds, brilliant minds think alike. Now, Michael, what would be your second?
My second one that kind of highlighted a collaboration of Tim Burton's was him with Danny Elfman. Well, they worked together on 15 or so movies, but Nightmare Before Christmas. Where he didn't direct it, but it was basically his baby.
Yeah.
It was directed by a stop-motion animating director, Henry Selick. And even though it wasn't like, he wasn't there behind the scenes moving like the Jack Skellington character, it was all him.
Yeah.
It kind of started as a pitch that he had submitted to Disney back in like the 80s when he was just an animator himself. He was working on like Fox and the Hound and the Black Cauldron and things over in Burbank. And, you could see like he's always had an interest in animation.
Yes.
Whether it was even in Beetlejuice.
Or Frankenweenie.
Well,
because he was an animator before he did anything else with Disney.
Yeah.
Like he did Fox and the Hound.
Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
But where he kind of really he's kind of like yin and yang with like Danny Elfman.
Yeah.
In terms of like the music that is very like, oh, that is such a Tim Burton movie because of Danny Elfman's kind of dark gothic score. And Danny Elfman came out of Oingo Boingo, and it was amazing to have. It's amazing for him to have like a second life as a composer, kind of in the same way that Tim Burton had, was a animator and went to direct. I guess every animator is kind of like a little mini director.
True.
Yeah.
But like The Nightmare Before Christmas was just such a wonderful like little fairy tale of a movie. A lot of his movies tend to be like these little small fairy tales, and him and Marilyn Manson basically kept teens clothed. And Hot Topic in business from 1993 to 1998.
You know what I was going to say about Beetlejuice that I kind of stopped is that Tim Burton films tend to show these two worlds that live in parallel.
Yes.
And in Nightmare, there's this intersection where one goes into the forest and they see that there's doors to all these different worlds. And in Edward Scissorhands, there's the suburban world, and then there's this castle that's way up on this hill that nobody ever really talks about. But it seems like in Beetlejuice, there's also the world
afterlife.
Of the afterlife.
The world of the
So, and I what I love about that is kind of we all kind of suspect that really exists. That there's this other world. Sometimes it's a dream state that we go to, and he's actually tapping into it. And David Lynch has kind of done that for years. The kind of idea of this strange, almost like dream state that we go into, but then the rules of engagement between those two worlds, when somebody becomes a fish out of water, like a Scissorhand guy in the suburbs, or like the Alec Baldwin character going into the afterlife, it's funny to see that happen.
Yeah, definitely when you see like the Halloween Jack, like walking around Christmas Town, and he doesn't understand anything that's going on, but then at the same time is like enthralled by it. And he's like, even within his own kind of Halloween Town, he is the king of, I guess, whatever Halloween Town, but he's also the outsider. He's the one that's like
heavy as the head that wears the crown.
Yeah,
and also has a skeleton head on it.
He's like always looking for something different, or he's reached the point where he's like, is this it?
Yeah,
it's 364 days until the next Halloween.
Yeah, he's having like an existential crisis.
Yeah.
Basically,
I think what those outsider characters also do is show us how weird the real world is. So if you're Edward Scissorhands and we see through his eyes these heavily make-upped, colorfully dressed weird ladies who live in suburbia, big beehive hairdos, or we see how actually kind of weird that a guy named Sandy Claus is. Like, that's for kids? Because that seems weird. He sneaks into your house? That seems weird, right?
I think why this pick is on my Mount Rushmore was because of the music of it.
Oh, yeah,
Danny Elfman, like we said, had done a number of scores from his very first work, from Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and also got Beetlejuice and Batman and Edward Scissorhands and yada yada.
Yeah.
By the time he gets to Nightmare Before Christmas, it really showed his work as a songwriter as well, not just someone that does music, and that kind of harkens back to, the Boingo days.
Yeah.
And he performed the singing voice of Jack as well. But it's interesting that he really hasn't. There have been movies that he's done, Tim Burton, that haven't included Danny Elfman, but they always seem to come back together.
Yeah.
And they always kind of finds the right note together with him.
Yeah. Richard, what do you got?
All right, so my next one, I'll jump ahead to the dark Tim Burton, animated Tim Burton. Did not do Nightmare Before Christmas. I instead did Corpse Bride, which I think is a really underrated movie in general, especially within his canon. It was actually made at the same time as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So he was going back and forth between doing, during the day, like his main gig, kind of doing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He had a co-director for Corpse Bride. So then he would come and check in after he's done at the set of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, figure out how things were going, give some feedback, some ideas on what to do, and then just go back. And it's funny because if you look at the two movies, I think Corpse Bride is a much better movie.
Oh, you do?
Than Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I think it's, in terms of comparing it to Nightmare Before Christmas, I think they're both pretty close to being on par. I guess I chose this partially because he actually directed it. He had his hands directly on it versus sort of not secondarily because he was kind of his idea.
Sure.
But, and I think it's to me, it kind of shows Tim Burton's movies sort of had this romantic side to them. So maybe the romance is not the most normal.
Yeah,
sure. None of his romances
are ever normal.
Yeah.
And this is, kind of plays into that, where there's for lack of a better term, I think a love triangle between Johnny Depp, his main character, his bride-to-be, and then a ghost.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, it's just a very sweet movie. And even though it's got a lot of, it's called Corpse Bride. It's
a lot of gallows humor.
Yeah, a lot of gallows humor. Visually, it's a very dark movie. This was when he was in that period where everything was just like this and Sleepy Hollow, and just everything was just how much blacker could we make this movie? It was basically in his Spinal Tap vinyl album cover phase. But even within that, he was able to, I think, bring some, pardon the pun, life into this movie. It's a movie that I don't think gets enough credit. I think when it came out, it was successful. When I was doing some research on, people ranking Tim Burton movies, a lot of times this was near the bottom. And I just couldn't figure that. I can't quite figure that out.
Maybe it's because derivative.
Maybe people think that it's kind of a second-rate Nightmare Before Christmas. But I think it's got its own charm. I think it's more of obviously it's more of a romantic movie, quote unquote.
You want to get your lady ready in the mood.
Yeah, throw in that movie with the zombie corpse bride. Oh, yeah. No, it's for me it's. I don't know. Just really
what I think when you talk about romance, it makes me acknowledge that Tim Burton acknowledges not. If Tim Burton does romance, it's how romance really feels. It's full of melancholy, and missed opportunity and sorrow and regret and these ideas of if you could turn back time, what decisions would you have done differently? Or so I feel like that Corpse Bride kind of captures some of that.
Sure,
so, yeah. Hey guys, guess what? We're halfway through, and before we ask you to rate and review our podcast, we want to suggest using Audible. Who? You. Because Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. And when you go there, if you like Tim Burton, like we do on this podcast, you might check out American Legends, The Life of Johnny Depp, frequent collaborator with Tim Burton, by Charles River editors and Morley Schulman. That's right. With 180,000 other titles, Audible has it all. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Rushmore. I'll repeat it. It's audibletrial.com/Rushmore, and you'll get a free audiobook. So we are at our halftime, and we'd like to invite you to join us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and get in the conversation. We'd love to hear what you would like to hear us discuss on Mount Rushmore. Go ahead and give us your opinions on past episodes, and go ahead and get in the conversation. Another thing you can do to help the podcast is download, rate, and review our past episodes on the podcast aggregator of choice. Thanks, and we are back to the episode. Michael, what is your third choice?
My third choice is his next muse, I guess, his collaboration with Johnny Depp.
Never heard of him.
Jonathan Depardieu.
This is a French actor.
Practically. Like, didn't he fuck off to France for a little
that's
bit?
right. Yeah,
he did.
And married a lady and then beat her up.
But
It's got dark all of a sudden.
Sorry.
well, it's a Tim Burton. It's a
There
Tim
you go.
Burton story. So, but Johnny Depp in Tim Burton's Ed Wood.
My favorite
Which is
movie.
probably-
On my list as well. That's
Is it-
that's the goofy Ed Wood one.
This is probably his best directed film, even though it made no money, which I guess makes sense.
Right. It was about someone who made no money. So.
Yeah, I guess it was appropriate. Johnny Depp plays the titular character of Ed Wood, famous director of terribly awful movies like Plan 9 from Outer Space and Glenn Glenda, in another kind of outsider role of being a transvestite cross-dressing director who would stop at nothing to make his terrible movies and would constantly try to put himself into the movie or his ideas, like transvesticism, that the people that would making the movie would be like, what the hell are you trying to do? I'm just trying to make this crappy sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
And his performance was as manic and as perfect as anything, and just so driven.
Yeah.
And I think it was very, it was such an interesting choice for him to make it in black and white purposefully, and just it made it very, very much feel of the age of when these movies were made. and what the movies were
Yeah.
about.
I think in a lot of ways, Beetlejuice might be the most Tim Burton-y movie, but I think these characters might be the most Tim Burton-y characters. I think probably the ones that he feels maybe the closest to. You know, because as crappy as the movies were, Ed Wood was an auteur. Like, he had these visions in his head of these movies, and he was determined to get these movies made the way he wanted to get them made. I mean, that's the auteur kind of framework, right?
Yeah.
Just so happened that they were terrible, but there's this oddball community that he kind of picks up and supports him, and he supports them. They support him.
Vampira and
Bela
Bela
Lugosi
Lugosi and
and
Tor.
Criswell.
The amazing Criswell.
Yeah, so I think that's what is at the heart of a lot of Tim Burton movies, like, you know, the outsiders and finding this community even as an outsider, even if that means finding other outsiders and creating your own community.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what Ed Wood is about, and partially at least.
Yeah. I always feel like Afterlife, Underbelly, they're two different sides of the same thing. Like, there's all these people who he collaborated with lived in the least legitimate part of Tinseltown, of this most glamorous thing in the world, and they had this kind of losers club,
Right?
Ragtag band of misfits that cling together to do in the least legitimate way the thing that was the biggest form of entertainment,
and also are completely delusional, especially Ed Wood, who thinks every movie he makes is going to be his,
His masterpiece.
his Citizen Kane,
which
is why they then have the totally fictional scene with him meeting Orson Welles at the bar and kind of convincing him to go back and make the movie his way.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. I think it's something with Tim Burton characters too. They seem to have ideas in their head that might be grander than, either not well thought out or grander than they're able to carry off. Like Jack Skellington. He gets this grand idea that he's going to take over Christmas without having really thought out how this would work or really having any skills necessary to pull this off.
Yeah.
Pee-wee is essentially one giant ball of enthusiasm and not just sort of going forward.
Yeah,
it's all forward momentum.
It's all his plans happen as they're happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of Ed Wood, right? That's just like, I'm going to make this movie and it's going to be incredible, and just not understanding, no, I am making schlock, because it's easy to make schlock. It's easy to make bad movies. It's hard to make bad movies that you think are good movies.
Yeah. I love Depp's performance because it seems like the other side of Forrest Gump or something. This character who is gleefully ignorant of their shortcomings, or you believe them to be ignorant, until at some point somebody cuts through his facade and he goes from that kind of cheerful optimism, sure, Bella, to kind of shrugging and realizing that he's living in a world where people don't accept his flaws or his differences.
Right.
And then he has to kind of re-optimize and go back into this state. And then at the end, when he finds a woman who accepts him for him, and they go off into the darkness together.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so wonderful. The one thing I think Tim Burton has done is explore all these different fractal refractions of the universal monsters. And so Dark Shadows was essentially kind of this vampire character.
Right.
Bela Lugosi is Dracula on his day off. And here's this guy what if Dracula retired to the suburbs, was still kind of treated as an old boogeyman, and what's it like for Dracula to get on the bus, to go to the store, to be a heroin addict. And that's one of the things I loved. And
the stuff people do in the suburbs.
Yeah, all that stuff. So yeah, love that choice. Also, I love that movie because it felt like it was Bill Murray's return to cinema in the weirdest part ever of Bunny, what's her head? the transvestite who was also in Plan 9. Mm-hmm. And it felt like Burton is able to grab these comedians and put them in these amazing cameo roles that use this part of them that they never get to do. So that was so fun. Now it's Richard. Yeah!
All right, my last one in the never got made category is Superman Lives.
I'm delighted that you chose this.
Yeah, I as in doing the research for this, I was like, okay, I know the movies he's directed. I know some of the stuff that he's been involved in, if not directed. There's actually a whole Wikipedia page just on unreleased unfinished Tim Burton works.
Oh wow!
And it's pretty deep, because he is somebody who gets into a project and seems to have this issue of something will come up. It's not quite Terry Gilliam,
Yeah.
but a lot of times I think people hire him because he's Tim Burton.
Yeah.
And then he decides to make a movie that's a Tim Burton movie. And then
Yeah.
people freak out
What the
because
heck?
it's a
What
Tim,
are you doing?
It's
Yeah.
a Tim Burton movie.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you hired him because he's this.
Yeah.
Don't make him have to try and make like a studio movie.
This drawing of Curious George shows an arm growing out of his forehead.
I don't remember that
I
from
remember
the
the
books.
man in the yellow hat.
My
Now the
favorite.
yellow hat is just dripping blood constantly.
I think this is a great pick, and I think what is one of my favorite things about this movie that was never made is that over the last like 5 or 6 years, maybe even less than that, all these different like video test footages
Oh yeah.
of like the
Right.
costumes and like the like making of and like the behind the scenes stuff about what this movie could be started coming out, and it's just like it's insane. I mean, it's Tim Burton, but it's just like
And there's a documentary about that, actually called "The Death of Superman Lives."
I haven't
Oh.
seen. It's on like my if it ever pops up on Netflix, that's the amount of effort I'll take.
They
see.
they have a lot of the behind the scenes footage of what was shot before everything kind of fell
Christopher
apart.
Walken maybe as like Brainiac and like
Kevin Spacey was also in line for that.
oh, was he too?
Yeah. So no, he's in line for Lex Luthor. Actually, he was in line for Lex Luthor for this. Whole thing fell apart. He wound up doing Lex Luthor
Yeah.
anyway later
Oh.
on. It's kind of interesting. But
I think this is entirely fascinating as a choice, just because it's like, you know, like he must have so many different pitches that come through his office, and like there are ones that I think he stopped doing this to do like Sleepy Hollow,
Oh, is that right?
yeah,
and it was-
that's right.
and like, you know, he could have gone on to do another Batman movie and then was just like a producer on like the following Batman movie and started Superman and just kind of didn't really go anywhere, or it started to go so, and then, you know, the big production houses were just like, we spent too much money on
Yeah.
this already.
Yeah. I found him for a guy who tells stories about eccentric outsiders who are largely misunderstood. There is a affinity he has for these big studio projects. Like, I think he loves getting a big soundstage and putting a cool set in it and doing all these things that cost a lot of fucking money.
Or these special effects that are just, you know, throwing money at
Yeah.
constantly. He wants to try and take an auteur's eye or almost an indie filmmaker's eye. What happens if I apply that to a big budget blockbuster?
Yeah.
Which is what happened here. I mean, first off, he started working. The whole project started on it with a Kevin Smith script, which think about Kevin Smith and Tim Burton working together. It's like the two people who it'd be hard to think of two people who have sensibilities that are like more just polar opposites.
Well, I'm sure Kevin Smith too wanted to keep it as close to I mean, this was probably what, 94, 95, something like that.
Yeah, that feels about right.
Probably wanted to keep
Oh, no,
it,
like a little bit later, like 97, 98.
probably wanted to keep it as close to the comic book story of where Superman died as possible.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that, you know, the studios get involved, and then
They got
and then-
really involved.
And then Tim Burton gets like, you know, like you said, like if you bring in Tim Burton to make a movie, there are gonna, you know, someone's gonna be dressed in black and white stripes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they John Peters, who is this very famous Hollywood film producer, was involved in producing Superman Lives, and he pushed Kevin Smith to do things like he really wanted a giant spider
Oh, yeah.
in the movies, and Superman was supposed to at some point he just had to write a giant spider in there.
Yeah.
Of course, this doesn't get made; it winds up going into Wild Wild West, which John Peters produced. And there's just he kept throwing things like he wanted him to fight a polar bear at one point. Nobody really knows why. He just thought Superman fighting a polar bear
Yeah.
would be a good idea. And so, you mentioned the Nicolas Cage thing, and that's if you don't know much about this movie, I think people know the footage, the photo of him in the
Like
costume
long
test
hair.
when he's got the super long flowing hair because he just got off the set, or he may have still been shooting Con Air, so he has that like a crazy long Con Air greasy straight hair, and then this like ridiculous Superman suit that looks like it's 5 sizes too big for him, but it's got all the fake muscles and everything kind of cut into it.
And like the strange like iridescence on it too, just odd.
So you look at that and you go, "Oh my God, this would Nicolas Cage as Superman?
Yeah.
How would this would never have like worked? It looks like it never would have worked, but I think it actually would have worked because the story that they wound up getting to with Tim Burton is that Superman is basically trying to deal with the fact that he's an alien.
Yeah.
And that he's not human, and that he's not of Earth, and that he is constantly feeling that way, even though he's living here and interacting with people and pretending to be human.
Yeah.
That he's really not human. He kind of just knows this, and I think some versions he doesn't actually know he doesn't remember any of his backstory.
Oh.
So he actually thinks he's a human who's got these weird superpowers.
Oh.
And so that is right in the wheelhouse of Tim Burton, of that kind of outsider person who feels alienated, literally in this case. And I think Nick Cage could have played that because he looks like an alien, for God's sakes.
Yeah. I thought that until I saw Ghost Rider and saw him as a superhero in that.
Well, that's just a bad movie, though. But that's
I love Ghost Rider. It seems like it was failing in the entirely failing in a pattern of success. So if you think of what Batman was, who should we hire to play Batman? Michael Keaton?
Right.
What? And I could totally see how the studio was kind of like, well, this guy seems to kind of make magic out of these misfit kind of components here. So that's a fun pick. Michael, what's your last one?
So sticking with my collaboration theme, he kind of has these muses, and we talked about Johnny Depp, and he kind of has worked with him on 8 or 9 movies. But someone that he's worked with almost as much was his wife, Helena Bonham Carter, who she originally was on Planet of the Apes on his a Planet of the Apes movie.
Yeah.
And then went on to play all these little bit parts. And the one that I think is the most Tim Burton-y type thing for him to do would be to do Alice in Wonderland. Mm-hmm. And had her play the Queen of Hearts in this really exaggerated role. And in all but one of the movies that he had her in, she's always this weird, strange bit part. And I wonder if it's because they were romantically linked from that movie going forward, and he wanted to cast her and found her intriguing, but didn't want to put her in the main role. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think she was she co-starred basically with Johnny Depp and Sweeney Todd. But
and she actually had to audition for the role of in Corpse Bride.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, it took her 2 weeks, even though they were married or together at the time, to tell her she'd gotten the part.
Huh. But Alice,
what a dick.
Who tells her when she's not in the movie?
When they start making it, and she's like, "Honey, so where are you going today?" I'm just gonna go.
We're kind of divorced.
Gonna go see some friends.
Yeah,
I'll be back after last call. I'll be back after last call.
He made Alice in Wonderland. That came out in 2010, which feels like forever ago, but it also feels like right around the corner. And that was a really strange adaptation, where, like you said, he almost fell in love with the computer graphics of it all. To either make Helena Bonham Carter 3-4 times the size of her normal head, or to have Johnny Depp do this weird dance routine that comes out of nowhere, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, or these weird amorphous blob characters. And they feel if you look at each one of the characters in it, it feels very much it all feels Tim Burton. But to see the 2 little blobby characters and the Tim Burton or the Johnny Depp's Mad Hatter, who kind of feels like a Beetlejuice type.
Very much. Even from the look, the way he's portrayed.
But that movie, and you can tell why people bring him in to make movies. That movie made $1 billion.
Yeah.
And I know that you work for a certain mouse house.
Yeah.
And so when he's attached to a project, it must just be okay, we know we're going to make X amount of money.
International box office. These names are going to cut through the marketing, whatever. It's going to be Johnny Depp. It's going to be Tim Burton, and they
kind of forget the movies that don't do as well, like the Dark
Mars,
Shadows,
Mars Attacks,
which I loved. But
I almost had Mars Attacks in the Goofy.
Yeah,
because it's goofier than Ed Wood. It is one of the goofiest movies of all time.
It's so strange.
It's so odd. I mean, you've got Sarah Jessica Parker's head on a chihuahua's body.
Yeah,
you've got you got Slim Whitman like music being the saving grace. It's such a fucked up movie.
I think what he does interestingly is deliver us the book we didn't read that conflicts with the movie we fell in love with. So if he delivers a Roald Dahl, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory type movie, it's like the book. It's subversive. It's got satire. It's got stuff for adults. And then we have stuck in our mind the Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka, the Technicolor wonder that we saw as kids. And it conflicts. And sometimes we think, oh, that's not as good. Or he didn't do that movie as well. No, he did the book. And I feel like Lewis Carroll might have been totally like channeled into Tim Burton, because I imagine if Lewis Carroll were here, he'd say, yes, that's my vision right there. These strange blobs and these strange this and strange that. That's what it's like to be on acid. So, yeah. So, I mean, kudos to him for doing that, but sometimes it gets... And what I think he's also done is done adult versions of kids' films. We go there and we think that this movie has to have this kind of very homogenized, simple through line that a kid would appreciate, when really these books were really kind of loved by generations, and the mature themes that are addressed are something that kind of blows people's minds.
It's funny, like I know we're close to wrapping up here, but if you ask someone about Tim Burton right now, they'd probably say, well, he hasn't really done a lot lately, or he hasn't had a big hit in a while, or something like that. So I couldn't think of it. But the last movie he did was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children.
Yeah.
Movie version, again, adaptation of a film series. Made almost $300 million in the box office.
That's crazy.
I didn't see it.
No.
I don't know anyone who saw it. But his movie, I mean, Dark Shadows made $250 million at the box office, eventually up globally.
I saw it like it was on Netflix. Not bad.
Really?
It's like kind of just fun. His movies are just like, no matter what. Like, just looking through the list of, like, we saw Big Eyes recently.
That's a very good movie.
Yeah,
actually
pretty interesting.
Really love that movie.
Really, like, he's able to find, like, unique topics even amongst, like, I mocked Dumbo at the beginning, but I'm sure it's going to be like a really interesting take on Dumbo.
Yeah, it'll be really, really
it's
visual
not
splendor.
It's not going to be bland, certainly.
And I guess I bring that up just to wrap this up. I mean, you mentioned the sort of people bring Tim Burton in to direct these movies. And clearly there is no matter what he does, there are people who will go, Tim Burton directing Dumbo, Tim Burton directing Miss Peregrine. I want to see what he does with that.
Yeah.
Whether or not it actually is good or not, or somewhere in between, there is, I think, a lot of us who will go, yeah, I'll give that a shot, even if I'm not interested necessarily. I mean, we probably weren't interested in the Keane paintings necessarily before you saw that movie.
Yeah.
But it wound up being something that I'd watched basically because it was Tim Burton.
Yeah. You know what I hear he's doing? Sisterhood of the Traveling Black and White Striped Pants.
Ooh,
so hey,
we're wrapping up now.
So we're wrapping up, guys.
Long day.
So this has been a fun discussion. Michael, you get big points because you brought up one of my favorite movies, and that is Ed Wood. And
so did I. It's one of my picks too.
No, oh shit. Okay, so do you, Richard, because you brought that up too. So point. Richard, you get what I call balls points for bringing up a movie that didn't even get made. Superman Lives. I thought that was, you sacked up and you did the man thing there. So that was took a lot of guts.
Or the woman thing. Woman could sack up too.
A woman could sack up too. Neither of you get points because I never saw really Beetlejuice, and what I saw I didn't like.
What?
Yep.
Hold on. Whoa.
Yep.
What?
Save it for Jeff Cast.
Yeah,
no.
We're
not. No.
Yep.
You didn't like Beetlejuice.
So I don't think Michael Keaton was funny. I thought he was. I didn't. Whatever was happening in it, didn't think it was that interesting.
The part where he was horny and then grew horns. That wasn't.
Yeah. You know what? Also, people who imitate Beetlejuice, I never think they're funny.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Is that like Ace Ventura?
Yeah. It's never funny. Yeah. If you like that, you're not funny. Okay.
So I guess we're not funny, Michael.
So that was the non-points.
I guess that's proven already. But
Richard, I like your unusual take on Corpse Bride. I thought that was interesting because you kind of talked me out of thinking it was derivative and you know what? Why I thought that is because Michael reminded me that Nightmare Before Christmas was not directed by Tim Burton. So
played yourself, fool. Stick a quarter in your own ass because you just played yourself.
It's titles with a little leeway, guys. You got one more to go.
I got one more to go. Okay, I'm gonna pick Alice in Wonderland because I work for a major entertainment company that is depending on that in order for myself to have employment. This has been the Mount Rushmore podcast. I'm Tim Burton.
I'm Johnny Depp.
I'm Danny Elfman. Oh, what was the name of the character that he played?
Ed Wood.
Oh my God! See,
What's happening here?
That's
Michael's brain broke.